The special election to fill New York's 3rd congressional seat, once occupied by Santos, will occur on February 13th. There will not be a primary. Rather, local party leaders will choose who will be on the ballot. Nassau County Republican Chair Joseph Cairo says there is, quote, no clear-cut choice for a candidate yet. Joining us to discuss why he believes he is the best choice to represent the GOP in the 3rd District is Air Force veteran and former Vice President at J.P. Morgan, Kellen Curry. Kellen, welcome to Newsline.
Well, hey, thanks so much for having me. This is quite the operation. It's my first time here, and it's a pretty unique setup. I like it.
Well, we appreciate you coming in studio. And let's start off with one of the biggest news, frankly, of the year. George Santos was expelled from the House of Representatives last Friday. He becomes only the 6th member to be expelled from the institution. What did you make of the decision by a majority of the House, 2/3 majority, to expel him?
Yeah, I know it was quite the debate. You know, this was the 3rd vote that we took, and you know there were some people that came down on the other side. But I think it was the right step in the direction for the district and for the country to have George Santos removed. And so we've been running for 9 months now. We kind of anticipated this would potentially happen, and so here we are. And it was a prescient move on our part. So we're well prepared to compete in a special election and be successful.
Now, Kellen, you served 2 tours of duty in Afghanistan. And I just want to know how that experience impacted your foreign policy beliefs, and do you feel it influenced your desire to support Israel?
Oh, absolutely. I think, you know, my service in Afghanistan was transformational for me. It gave me a deeper understanding of how special this country is, how important it is to fight for the values and principles that make this country a great place, a exceptional nation. When we think about Middle East policy and Israel in particular, this district, you know, it's home to a large and vibrant Jewish population that's concerned about what's going on in Israel with the Hamas war. I think what we have to, you know, think about is what comes next in terms of the Gaza Strip and who's going to govern it. But right now, you know, Israel is doing the best they can to make sure they root out the Hamas terrorists.
Let me go off of that. Who do you believe should govern the Gaza Strip? Would you support a 2-state solution?
Well, it's a deep question. It's a hard question. I think there has to be a international solution, at least in the interim. Right now, the administration is in talks with the government in Israel about a potential Palestinian Authority. I don't believe Israel supports that approach. And so there's going to have to be a vigorous debate about what comes next. I think the Arab nations are going to be involved in some sort of U.S. and Israel-led coalition. And so, you know, we'll see what happens as we go forward. But there needs to be some sort of consensus about how to govern Gaza to make sure that it's not an ungoverned territory.
Is there a specific structure that you would support? Is there someone you support leading the Gaza Strip? Should multiple states be controlling it? What are your thoughts?
I think so. I think the Arab nations have to be a part of this solution. Certainly, Egypt is a close neighbor. I think that, you know, their opinion is going to be very much important to have. Some people are talking about the UN being a part of the solution. I don't think that's the right direction to go because there's so much animosity between the UN and Israel right now. So, you know, the Abraham Accords were a good foundational piece in terms of the foreign policy in that region that can help forge a consensus on what to do with Gaza. But look, you got millions of people in a small confined space. The last thing we want is for a persistent security issue to be there. And so we have to get together and figure out a way forward with our Arab partners.
But just to be clear, 2-state solution, not necessarily something you're the biggest proponent of.
Not right now. The conditions on the ground would have to change for a 2-state solution to become possible. I think in the interim, there's so much work that needs to be done to just stabilize the region and stabilize Gaza, and then potentially you could get to a discussion years, even decades probably down the road on a 2-state solution.
And you mentioned, Kellen, how it's not necessarily the best idea for the United Nations to get involved. Now, as far as this pertains to the United States, are there any particular initiatives you would support as it relates to this conflict if you were elected to Congress?
Yeah, certainly the humanitarian piece of this is important. We've got to get our arms around that. So much of what we don't want to have happen is a large group of people have deep animosity towards Israel because they feel as if their humanitarian concerns were ignored. But we have to balance that with rooting out the terrorists that are there. And so it's not going to be easy. It's going to take a lot of work on our part and our allies in the region. And so that's why presidential leadership is going going to be really, really important to make sure that we can get to a way forward that preserves peace in Israel, that allows Israel to restore deterrence to their own people and their own territory.
Now, if you're just tuning in, you're listening to Newsline on WRHU FM 88.7. We are speaking with 3rd District candidate Kellen Curry. Now, Kellen, one issue your campaign highlights is youth wellness. It's my understanding that you want to increase federal funding to support mental health initiatives for youth. What is your message to individuals who are struggling with mental health nationwide? And how would you help them if elected?
Yeah, we're going through a tremendous transition in our society right now. I think back to my own youth, and it was filled with a lot of sports, a lot of activities. I was active in student government, active in football and track. I was a terrible basketball player, so not so much that sport. But all those things contributed to my mental well-being. And right now, what we're seeing, particularly in our Long Island schools, is kids coming into schools with a lot of mental issues. And so schools are having to hire more mental health professionals, which is increasing the cost of public school education. And so we have to, as a federal partner, we have to meet our local school systems where they are. And I think, providing grants, providing programming at the federal level to help alleviate that concern will be a step in the right direction.
And something else you've said you wanted to implement is a national service program. Now, just to clarify, this is not a draft, correct?
Absolutely. No, it's not a draft. It's not compulsory. And in fact, it's just an idea that we put on our website. And there's a lot of ideas out there that we could fashion into an American way in terms of how to do this. It's really born out of the fact that right now our military recruitment is challenged. And so they have not been meeting their recruitment goals for a number of years now. It's an all voluntary force. And at the end of the day, we have to have people who are willing to serve. You can't have a strong military. You can't defend the homeland without people who are willing to step up and to serve. And so from my view, my vision is that we affirmatively engage young people about the value of service, and a national service program would help us do that.
3rd District Republican candidate Kellen Curry. Kellen, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.